Hello, I'm Sherry Sturman, Director of Crayola Education. We're excited to share this series, Creative Spa for Teachers, with everyone who educates children at school or at home. This is a special time and place where you can rejuvenate, refresh, and rekindle your creative spirit. When you're enjoying today's creative activities, you'll also receive great tips on how to use gardens with children to help them connect with nature. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Stephanie Rose, a blogger, master gardener, and author who has written 11 books on gardens, herbal recipes, and the power of nature to heal. Stephanie, we're delighted to have you join us and that your son Asher will be joining us for the art experience. Stephanie, your interest in healing gardens and wellness started when you were addressing your health issues. What started as personally directed rehabilitation led you to learning more about plants and now teaching others. Please tell us about your journey from first scratching the soil for a few minutes a day to then using gardens to restore your health and inspiring others to do the same.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to be here. I love talking to different groups about my story of how I started gardening because for me, it was something that completely changed my life. I often say that gardening saved my life because I got severely disabled and sick overnight. I got a headache in 2006 and I wasn't able to work anymore. I was in bed for 2 years and it was a really challenging time. As I started to gain some strength back after that 2 years, I was sort of getting through around that 1.5 year mark. I was starting to get some strength back. I started going outside and just looking at the, little bit of yard that I had in my urban Vancouver home and thinking, okay, this is where I'm going to start to do my rehabilitation. This is where I'm going to start to gain my strength back. So I went to the library and I got every book on gardening that I could. And I lied in bed and I read them. And then I went outside and I just started with anything that I could start with, something easy. I started with looking at the lawn that I had and the shrubs that were there and learning about them. I started planting a few seeds here and there. And really because I was so, I was so weak at that time, I had to start with, as you said, I was scratching in the soil just a little bit at a time. I had to start with just 5 minutes a week. And then I started working up to 5 minutes a day, then 10 minutes a day. And by 5 years later, and I love to show the transformation of what my garden looked like, because you can really see how also I transformed. By the end of 5 years, I had become a master gardener and started volunteering with children in children's gardens and teaching the next generation to find the same sort of passion. I joined a community garden and started gardening in my community. I started a charity garden. And so I really felt like this was something that I felt really called to share with the rest of, anybody else who's, sort of dealing with whatever it is that they have going on in their lives, whether it's something like a chronic illness or a severe disability, or, even just, having a bad hair day. Gardening can really help. And when we work with children, we see how much it means to build these connections with plants. So it's part of why I started writing garden therapy, why I started writing books. Everything that I do is DIY so that people can get that sense of how they can easily accomplish it. If I can accomplish it as a disabled person, as a parent, as a working person, then people can also accomplish it with the things that are sort of going on in their lives. It's a really wonderful way to introduce the power of plants into our days.
Really appreciate that context. Stephanie, many of our viewers are interested in learning what the term garden therapy means. You emphasize that gardening can be done anywhere, in an apartment, at a school, in community plots, even in tiny containers. You talk about how gardening can serve many purposes, including connecting with nature, using what you grow in recipes or in crafts, but you emphasize the enjoyment of the process. Could you share some tips for how someone might get started with garden therapy, even if they don't think they have a green thumb?
Gardening is something that it doesn't have to be that large homestead. You don't have to have a big space for a vegetable garden or raised beds. Gardening is, you can do it with houseplants on a windowsill. You can grow a few herbs in your kitchen. It really doesn't have to be a huge project. And part of the thing that I try to encourage folks to do the most is find something that's really high reward and low effort so that you get that instantaneous result. So a lot of the projects that I do with children are really crafty and really fun. And it's about sort of engaging children in the garden. How do we get them to go and play in the garden? And sometimes it isn't even about plants. Like one of the projects that I've done for Asher when he was quite young is I noticed he wanted to go out in the garden. He wanted to dig in the soil. He had a little gardening set with a trowel and he wanted to go and dig a lot. And I didn't want him to go and dig up every plant that was in the garden. And even though the garden space that I had designed for him had so many interactive components, I wanted him to have a space where he could feel really confident gaining those skills of digging and having fun with it. So I did a little container pot and I filled it full of dinosaurs that I got from a secondhand group and buried them in there, put a trowel in there, and he went out and he would just dig out the dinosaurs, or he'd plant them, or he'd plant them elsewhere in the garden. And it was a really fun way for him to sort of, get the feeling of getting dirt under his fingernails. You don't have to start tomato seeds, move them out to the garden, grow them in a raised bed, water them all season, and to taste what gardening is all about. You can find ways to get that sort of activity into your lives and into your children's lives and the children that you work with through any sort of interaction with plants and soil and sort of the fresh air and the act of doing it. So a couple of things that I really highly recommend that folks start with, even if they're not doing if they don't have a large garden space, you can do it in containers, and you can do it in garden beds, and you can even do them indoors. Is two things. One, I like starting with herbs because herbs are edible, fragrant, very easy to grow, and you can use them for culinary purposes, but also they're really rewarding to grow. So you can do that on a windowsill, in containers on your patio, or out in your garden. And the other thing I really love, and especially for children, is to grow edible flowers. Edible flowers are super easy to grow. You can even grow some of them inside. So something like a viola or a pansy, and it does sort of encourage those pollinators to come to our gardens. You don't have to grow them from seed. You can get them really inexpensively at the garden center. They look pretty and they taste really good. So it's quite a fun project to get those edible flowers into your garden, put them in salads, sprinkle them on pizzas, make cupcakes and put edible flowers on there, but then also have, like flower tastings. And that for me is really garden therapy. That's really how we come to a space where we find the passion of gardening, and it feeds us, but also it gives us this connection with plants that makes us want to interact with them more and allows us to protect nature.
Great tips. And you're right, this is really a powerful connection for people of all ages, which leads to my next question. Stephanie, the work that you've done in inner cities and with intergenerational community gardens has had a lasting impact on the people who get involved. Please tell us about those projects.
So I was part of a project called the Intergenerational Landed Learning Program for about 6 or 7 years. The program was about 15 years long, and it was a wonderful program that took school children that were inner city children who maybe lived in apartments or didn't have access to a garden, brought them to our local university farm and allowed them to have the opportunity to grow food from scratch and taste it. So because the school year starts in September, the children would start with a garden that was full of the harvest from the previous year, which is a wonderful way to start because you've got this motivation of all this wonderful food that you can taste. So they would harvest things, pick them, learn how to cook with them, share them with the group. And then over the winter months and then shut down the garden for the winter. And when the garden was shut down, we would go to the school and lay out maps. They would go through all the seed catalogs together, pick out what they wanted to grow, what were some of their favorites that they had in their previous garden, look at the different varieties, and then plan out and map what their gardens were going to look like. Then as we started to go back into the garden, we would go into the greenhouse, start seeds, start to see them grow, water them, nurture them. We did a lot of cooking with things like seeds at that point. So we were talking about the life cycles and how we can eat the food in many different stages, and also preserves. So food that had been reserved from a different season, and the children could see the value in how to preserve jams and jellies and pickles and things like that, so that you would have foods available throughout the year that came fresh from your garden. And then they would go out and they would plant the garden, tend to it, nurture it, prepare the soil and water. Just a wonderful project. Because by the end of the, at the beginning of the year, we would ask the question, so, what's your favorite vegetable? And folks, some of the kids would put up their hands and say, pizza. And by the end of the year, they were holding their bellies and complaining because they'd eaten too many kale flowers. I mean, and I would say, go home and tell your parents that you have a tummy ache because you ate too many kale flowers, and then bring some kale flowers to them so they can try them as well, because they are absolutely delicious. I don't think they really had tummy aches, but they were saying that they were so full they couldn't eat anything else because they were full of kale flowers. So, I mean, that's the beauty of working with children, is that, this kind of project, it allows that opportunity to see where our food comes from in a very different way. In my book, The Regenerative Garden, I've got a project in there about how to build a children's garden and how you can find ways to engage each one of the senses.
That's beautiful. I love the way you talk about engaging children in a food garden, but then also the way you just described something that you refer to as a children's garden that's really rich in tactile experiences. Tell us some tips for what kinds of plants you might grow in this children's garden that where they can touch the fuzzy leaves and they really get to explore the textures. It's a touching garden, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. You want to have those tactile plants, because so often we tell children, stay out of the garden, don't go on the grass. And a children's garden is something that you build in a way that engages children to go in there and really interact with the garden space. So it's the things that are on the ground have to be treadable, meaning that you can have little ground covers on the ground. I like to plant things like ajuga and euonymus, which covers the ground. That these things are really treadable. They can walk on it. They can walk on clover. They can see the bees, and some of them bloom. Like the ajuga has all these beautiful little purple blooms that come up and they get filled with bees and butterflies. So that's really, really nice. But also, other little plants down low, like bunny tail grasses that have these little fuzzy, what looks like bunny tails that, kids will be engaged to touch, or lamb's ear, which has got a soft, almost furry leaf that's sort of a silvery color. So those are really, really fun to touch. But I also like to plant things that, are sort of structural. So alliums are part of the, it's a summer flowering bulb, and it's part of the garlic and onion family. But they've got these ones that are called Globe Master, and they grow really, really tall, like 5 feet tall, with a giant pom-pom looking flower head on it that's bright purple. And so planting these in the garden so that they grow up tall, and then especially shorter children, are sort of in this forest of these big flowers. I like bleeding hearts because, they've got really, the white ones I think kind of look like chickens, and the red ones look like bleeding hearts. So those are really fun, and it's a really hardy plant. I also really like lilies because they'll grow up really tall and sort of hang down, so children can sort of walk under an archway of them. And what's nice about things like lilies is that they're super fragrant. So if we can add things that are fragrant into our garden, like mint, lavender, lilies, in this time of year in spring, we've got a lot of hyacinths, which are super fragrant when you're walking by, or even shrubs like sarcococa, which is a really nice, it's called sweet box is the common name. And it's a winter flowering shrub that has this beautiful fragrance that you're almost stopped in your tracks when you walk by it. So it's one of those things that is unexpected. So yeah, having them taste things in the garden, having them feel things, having them smell, having them listen as well. There's so many sounds in the garden that are sort of unexpected. If you've ever, obviously there's all the sort of birds that chirp and you can hear the bees buzzing, and I love the sound of a hummingbird when they come through. They just sound like a little zzz, like a little helicopter, a little race car buzzing by, and you usually hear them before you see them because they're so loud with their wings. But also the other sounds. I mean, maybe it's sounds of the wind going through the plants, or even a really fun sound if you happen to have something like bamboo as it gets hard and will knock together, and it sounds like almost like a wind chime. Asher loves to go and pick flowers for me, which, how heartwarming that he goes and picks flowers from the garden. And so when he does, I say thank you, and I'll put it in a vase, and then I'll sometimes encourage him to go pick another flower so that he can take it apart and inspect it, maybe look at it under a microscope or draw out the different parts of it, really sort of get a sense for what it looks like and what it does when we pull it apart. And then I encourage him to keep the rest of those in the garden because he's taking away the ones for the insects that need them and the birds that need them. So not to take everything, but to engage with some of it and then leave some of it so that those flowers can become the fruits or the seeds of the next generation of flowers.
I love the way you describe the children's garden as a please do touch experience. And really it is a full sensory, all senses engaged garden. So lovely suggestions to plant a children's garden. Well, we're really excited for the hands-on art demonstrations. And the first experience is sowing seeds of love. It really all starts with tiny seeds. So to help children understand gardens, we start to connect how those tiny seeds sprout into seedlings and then grow into mature plants. We're excited to hear how handcrafted seed pouches can be a great gift that kids can give to family and friends and community members. And these become lovely ways to share the love of gardening with others. So Stephanie and Asher, please start out by talking to us about collecting seeds that are non-invasive, organizing the seeds, giving some pizzazzy names to your seed pouches, and then show us how the seed pouches could be decorated.
We give away seed packets to Asher's schoolmates and friends, and sometimes we give them away to our people in our neighborhood just to sort of spread those seeds of love throughout our little community. One year we did sunflower seeds, and those little sunflower seeds, we had instructions on them so the kids could sprout them if they wanted to, and make those little sprouts into something that they would eat, or they could grow them into big flowers. Why do we want butterflies and bees in our garden?
Butterflies and bees, I'm pretty sure they both pollinate.
Butterflies and bees both pollinate, that's right. So I highly recommend using a butterfly or bee blend when you're giving away seeds that you purchase from your local seed company. And the reason why is because there's so many seeds out there that are wonderful in some areas, but perhaps invasive in others, right? Yeah. And we don't want to include plants that could be damaging to our environment. So we know if we find a local seed company that we really trust, and they will do the work for us in finding a blend that supports also our native bees and our native butterflies. So we could plant things like, I've got these beautiful poppies here. So gorgeous. And I would put these in my seed packets, because I got these from local companies. So after you've got your seed packets decorated, which I think Asher is really eager to show us how to decorate the seed packets, right? So I think what we'll do now is we'll have Asher and I demonstrate a little bit how to put these together. He will cut the paper, and then he'll show you some of the Crayola products that we use to decorate them, which was a lot of fun. Okay, so to make the seed packets, the first thing you do is download the printable, which there's a bunch of different versions for you. There is one that's got all these beautiful bees and butterflies on it. And there's one with just the flowers and a blank side so that you could write your own message. And then ones that are like this, which are completely blank. We've cut one out, as you can see, and Asher's working on coloring that one now. Cut along the very outside edge of each one of them, not the inside lines. Those lines are the fold lines. So cut along only the outside edge. Asher, can I hold yours up for a second? So you can see Asher has cut the outside edge of this one. Once you do that, then we're going to fold them. And so here's a really good example, just folding in these two sides and making a fold at the top here as well. And you see it folds into this little mini seed envelope. The only place to glue is right on these two outside edges. So a glue stick works really well for that. So just a little bit of gluing on each of these two sides, and then you stick it together like that. Then when you put your seeds inside the seed envelope, if you want, you can then glue the edge together so that they're ready to give away, or you can just fold the top in like that. Sometimes you can do that with an envelope as well. So with the two different designs, these are really easy to color. They've got those beautiful bees and butterflies, and they say all grow beautiful blooms. But on these ones, you can say things like sowing the seeds of love, you know, you're beautiful, new beginnings, things like that. Anything that's kind of, you know, fun and has to do with bees and pollinators and sort of starting the seeds and growing and spreading that love and growing together. So that's how you make these guys. Just fill them with little seeds and we can give them away.
Okay, that's my
Wow, those are gorgeous. Thank you, Stephanie and Asher, for showing how to do these homemade seed packets. Now we're ready for the second art demo. This is making colorful garden plant markers. And I love the way you and Asher selected stones and decorated them to add a splash of color and utility in the garden to easily identify the vegetation that you're growing. So let's start by you telling us how you found the stones and what you used to decorate them.
We've been collecting stones for many years. It's one of his favorite activities is to collect stones. Many years. Where do you find your stones, Asher? Can you give people a little bit of a tip on where to find them?
at the beach.
The beach is a good place. We have a lot in our garden because we've collected so many over the years.
Woods.
The woods, yeah. One of the things that we look for when we're looking for stones is we look for something with a really flat surface. So something like this, which is quite smooth, and it's almost like a good skipping stone because it will lie flat. And also we're looking for things that sort of have the shape of the things that we want to. Yeah, so this is a nice big one Asher's showing you. One that says be kind on it is a little bit bigger. What I look for is also one that is not just smooth, but sort of light in color. The darker ones are fine, but you might have to then give them some white paint as a background in order for the colors to show up really nicely. These white stones, if you find them, are also really great because you can transfer the paint onto them really well. It shows up really nicely. So any stones that are smooth, I really like flat ones. Round ones tend to roll a little bit more. And if they're darker, a coat of the white acrylic paint works really, really well. So then to paint them, once you've got your design, sort of your stones laid out, we wash them, right? We wash them in the sink to make sure that they didn't have any soil on them. And then let them dry completely before we start painting. So we used Crayola acrylic paints, so just simple acrylic paint colors. Use the white as the background and let that dry completely before we started anything else. Then we use the paint to do little designs. So these ones are strawberries that we can put in our strawberry patch, as you can see. And this was all done with just acrylic paint. After we painted it, let it dry. Okay, let me see. Pull that one away just a little bit so we can see it. It's shining in the light. There we go. That's a tomato. We did that one with acrylic paint. Hold on. I like that one. That was a good one to show. We did that one with acrylic paint and then did the outline of the tomato in black in one of the permanent markers. Now let's see. Here's another one. Oh yeah. Those ones are so great for the vegetable garden. Thanks for showing those, Asher. So those are eggplant and lettuce, if you want to do vegetable garden ones. And radish. And Asher was like very particular about this one. He said, make sure that the tip of the radish is whitish, Mom, because it's kind of whitish and pink. So we did. So that was really good. Okay, so those are all the ones that you could do typically for a vegetable garden, but because we want to really talk about the pollinator blends and building bee and butterfly gardens, we did these really cute stones. So I showed this one already. Oh, there's the sunflower popping up again, because sunflowers are such great plants to have in our garden that say things like be kind. Please show, this is my favorite. When he drew this, I thought, oh my gosh, that's probably the cutest bee I've ever seen in my life. So he did that with a permanent marker. And then we took acrylic paint and put it around the outside. And as you can see, these are kind of shiny. And that's because after we did the stones, you put a little bit of this glossy glaze over top of it. And the glossy glaze helps protect them so that they're weather safe. So now you can put these out in the garden and the paints are not going to start to wash away. But there was also some other fun ones that we have here, which was silver metallic. So we did, this little guy has got a silver metallic, this little butterfly here has the silver metallic. Oh, and Asher, can you hold up yes, can you hold up, this one was glitter. Can you hold up the butterfly? So we did both butterflies with something. Look at that one. We did glitter on that one. So it turned out really well.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, so we did all these different stones just with, some of these really common products.
While our viewers are finishing their colorful artwork, I'd like to remind everyone that it's easy to stay updated on future Creative Spa for Teachers sessions and the many Crayola education programs. Just sign up for our free Crayola Creative Learning e-newsletter. Each month, new teaching ideas and tips for taking care of yourself will arrive in your email. So Stephanie, during our initial chats, you also shared some ideas for science experiments that could be done at home or in school, such as seed starting and soil testing. Could you share a few of those simple science experiment ideas?
So in one of my previous books, Garden Alchemy, it's a recipe book for your garden, essentially. So it takes that sort of background that I have in herbalism and plants as medicine and uses it, and permaculture, and uses that as tools for our organic garden. So it's really about the concepts of experimentation, observation, and playing around and sort of testing your garden. And I wrote this book for adults, but then I started getting all this feedback that, especially because it came out in February of 2020, that people were using it at home. Parents were using it at home for homeschooling. They found that the experiments in there were really great for children. And, we're all children in some ways. We have that childlike wonder in our hearts that hopefully we're able to carry with us as adults. But it's really fun to do some of these projects with children because it does give them that sort of understanding of the life cycle of our spaces and of our gardens. So there was 2 projects in there that I think are really, really fun that you could get children started with, and one of them is seed starting. As you mentioned, seed starting is a great way, especially if you're giving away these seed packets and you're talking about the seeds. Keep some seeds to yourself, and then have the children start seeds in. You don't need any special equipment typically for seed starting. The only thing I would get is a sterile seed starting mix, and you can get that sort of at any garden center, and you don't need to get a whole bunch of it. So a seed starting mix is a soil-less mixture of a sterilized compost. It'll have a couple of other elements like maybe peat or coconut coir or something like that in there to hold moisture, and then something like perlite, which is a mined mineral that creates air spaces in it so that it's light and fluffy and the seeds don't have to work so hard in there, but it's also sterile, so it keeps all the the fungus and bacteria from attacking the seeds as they start. So a sterile seed starting mix is really all you need. In terms of containers, you can use, sort of any flower pots that you have around. Drainage holes is really important because if you have some sort of tray and then you water them, you want the water to be able to run out onto that tray so that it doesn't get soggy. Your soil mix doesn't get soggy. But you can also use anything like a recycled container, like go through your recycling bin and grab, those plastic salad boxes. They make great seed starting containers, or even yogurt containers or anything like that. Just pop a couple of holes into the bottom of them and put them on a tray. Fill it with a little sterile seed starting mix. Sprinkle your seeds or space them out based on, usually on every seed packet, there's information on the back that shows you how to grow them. So you can follow the instructions for how to space out your seeds. And then once they start to grow up a little bit, you can then move them out into the garden. So seed starting, super fun, but also allows children to see the life cycle of a plant. Another project you mentioned was in terms of looking at your soil. This is a really fun one and a really quick one that you can do in a short period of time, but it's an interesting way of teaching children about what's going on underneath the surface of our land, which is to do a soil test. It's to figure out your soil composition, essentially. So you'll go out to the garden with, a big 1 liter mason jar and fill that with a scoop of soil from your garden. So probably about a quarter of it full with soil from the garden. You want to dig a hole about 6 inches down, get a nice scoop of soil so that you can, get a good representation of what the soil composition is. Then fill that up with water, put a lid on it, give it a good shake, and then leave that out for about 24 hours. At the end of 24 hours, you can go back and you'll see that the particles have divided themselves into by size. So at the very bottom, you'll find the largest particles, which is sand. And so it'll be the heaviest part and it'll sit down at the bottom. Then there'll be a very clear layer in the middle of silt, which is the medium-sized particles, and then clay at the very top. It has the smallest size particles, so it sort of sits at the top and you can see those layers. So essentially what we're looking for in a really healthy soil is a balance of 40% sand, 40% silt, and 20% clay. And that makes for a really nice soil for growing just about any plant. So it's a great way for kids to have a look and go, okay, I only have 5% clay and I have 50% sand. So now what do we do to improve our soil so that we have, more moisture holding ability? Sand drains really quickly because it's got those larger particles. What do we do to get a better mix? And I'll give you the answer now. It's to add organic matter. So no matter what your soil composition is, if you add some organic matter in the form of, for example, compost, adding compost into your soil over time is going to improve the soil composition. So no matter what percentages you have, adding organic matter is always helpful. It's just you would add a little bit more if you have clay and a little bit less if you have sand, and sort of, adjust it that way. So a great way for children to sort of really get the understanding of how we prepare our soil in order for plants to grow, but also how much fun it is to play with dirt.
Wow, such great insights about soil, seeds, and the healing power of gardens. Our viewers are hungry to learn more about growing their own backyard gardens or containers, any way, shape, or form to start the plants and the garden therapy. Please tell us how they can follow you online and keep learning from you.
My website is called GardenTherapy.ca because I'm in Vancouver, BC, Canada. So I have a .ca website. But if you Google Stephanie Rose Garden Therapy, Stephanie Rose Garden, anything like that, I should come up. You can find me on all Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and all those places as Garden Therapy. If you go to my website, you can see all of my books there. Everything that we have on Garden Therapy on the website. There's about 2,000 projects there and lots of great kids projects. Actually, I have one post that I'll make sure that we get the link to you as well that has 60 projects to do with children. So lots and lots of ideas there for how to engage children in the garden.
Great. Stephanie, this has been super informative and inspirational. Gardens not only nourish us with delicious fruits and vegetables, but you've explained how cultivating gardens can be healing. What closing remarks do you want to share with today's viewers to help them get started planting those seeds to a healthy connection with nature?
I just have such gratitude for everyone who has taken the time to be a part of this today, because the more we engage with plants and the more we fall in love with them, the more we are able to help protect them. And, right now with everything that's going on, it feeds us and it makes us, feel joyful and gives us that little hope for the future. But at the same time, we really need, people out there planting things, protecting our bees, protecting our insects, and encouraging sort of the natural processes of nature, not just for our own benefit, but for everybody who we share this space with.
We want to thank Stephanie Rose and her son Asher for inspiring us today. And a special thanks to everyone who joined us for this session. Stay well, stay strong, and take care of yourself creatively.
Bye.
Goodbye.